No, thank you.
So the timing is bad.
No, that's all right. It's okay.
Anne? Oh, I can't hear you.
How about now?
Oh, I can hear you now. So I'm not able to turn my video on.
I don't know why. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, are you able to see like a little camera? And it should have, if you, it looks like you had
Sorry,
your,
I'm sorry. You think yes, it was
Okay.
hit. Sorry. I was trying to do it on the list. Okay.
no, you do it down the bottom.
Hi, Ken. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Patricia. It's Hillary.
Hi, Hillary.
Hi, I'm cooking, so you don't have to see me doing that.
Oh, we'd love to see that.
This is how I looked earlier today.
Fantastic.
Sarah McAllister, what is your dog's name?
He's muted. Sarah, you're muted.
Sarah, you're muted, but your dog is cute.
Celeste?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, this is Henry. For the first half hour or so, I'm driving, so I'm going to keep my video off so I don't make everyone sick with it bouncing around. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry
We
about
appreciate that.
that. Sorry.
No problem.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Is the meeting started?
No, people are still coming in.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm Robbie.
Hi, Robbie.
Probably.
Everybody, I'm going to put you all on mute, except the DRC members until the meeting gets started.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Good evening, everyone.
No.
Hi, Larry.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Ann,
Yes,
I think we can probably start the meeting. What do you think?
I think so. We have about 66 people.
Mhm.
Does it look like that everybody from the DRC is here?
I think so.
And is Jean McCoubrey here?
I am not seeing Jean.
I got a text from her that she doesn't have the link. I'm not quite sure why, so.
I'll send it to her.
Okay, thank you.
Ann, do you think we're ready to go?
Celeste, were you able to get Jean?
Yes, I did send it to her.
Okay. She hasn't popped in yet, but you could probably get started, John, just talking about the process.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for coming, everybody, and welcome. We have one item on the agenda tonight, 30 West Highland, and we'll get to it shortly. I really appreciate everyone attending. This is this is sort of community participation in action, and I want to assure everyone that we're really interested in what you have to say, and that everyone will have an opportunity to fully express themselves and have their viewpoints heard. Let me give you a sense of what we're going to do this evening with their agenda, and then we'll get right to it. After this brief welcome, we're going to have the members of the Development Review Committee introduce themselves, and just so you know who's who. I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes about how our process works and the sort of criteria we use in that process to recommend or not recommend projects. Then we're going to have the presentation by the project applicant of the 30 West Highland project. It's changed a little bit if you were at since the last meeting. After that presentation by the project applicant, we're going to hear from our subcommittee, which we formed at the last DRC meeting a month ago to take a look and see if they could come to some consensus on changes to this project. And that subcommittee included 3 members of the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee, 3 representatives of the neighbors, and 3 representatives of Chestnut Hill Conservancy. After those presentations by the applicant and the subcommittee, we're going to take questions from the DRC members, Then we're going to hear if there are any committee reports, and then we're going to open it up to you folks. Questions and statements from members of the community and the public. And we're going to use the same method we did last time, the chat. And what I'd like you to do is if you want to speak, just use the chat and send a message to Celeste Hardister, our development review coordinator, saying you'd like to speak. Don't send it to everyone. Don't send it to everyone. Don't send it to your friends. Make sure you send it to Celeste, and she will keep track of your chat requests and call on people in the order they're received. I expect we'll have a lot of questions and statements, and we're going to ask you, if you want to make a statement, to keep it to 2 minutes to make sure everybody is heard and people get their questions answered. After the statements, we're going to have we're going to open it up to possible motions for the disposition of this question, and then we'll adjourn. That means that normally what we do is we approve the minutes at the beginning or end, but I don't want to take that time, so we will do that remotely. Okay. So in a minute, I'm going to ask all the members of the DRC to introduce themselves, but I see that Kathy Clayton is here, and Kathy is the president of the Chestnut Hill Community Association. And I wonder, Kathy, if you'd like to offer a few words of welcome.
Kathy, you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Yep. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see so many people involved in the projects in our community. As you know, our purpose is to serve the public, and act as the venue for all interested community members to listen, comment, and question on property matters. We will then receive a report from this body tonight at our board of directors meeting, and our final position on this matter will be rendered to the city of Philadelphia. I'm looking forward to hearing views of all of you. I understand there's about 70 people on this Zoom tonight.
Mhm.
So welcome. And I also would ask you to please respect the time and give everyone who wishes to speak an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Okay.
John.
Thank you, Kathy. So if we could have the members of the Development Review Committee identify themselves. I'm John Landis. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Development Review Committee, and I also serve on the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee. And I'll just let people chime in however they want.
I'm Jan Album, and I represent the Streetscape Committee on the DRC.
I'm Rich Snowden, and I represent the Parking Foundation.
I'm Patricia Cove, and I chair the Historic District Advisory Committee for the Chestnut Hill Conservancy.
I'm Sam Filippi, and I represent the Chestnut Hill Business District.
Jean and Steve, do you want to pipe in?
Jean, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm Jean McCoubry, and I'm one of the LUPZ members represented on this DRC.
Steve, I don't know if you can hear us. Perhaps not. Okay, we'll try and get Steve back. That's Steve Gendler, who is also on the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee, was also on the subcommittee, and I will try and get him. I know he's coming in by phone. Celeste, Ann, and Melissa, if I could also ask you to identify yourselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann McNiff, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chestnut Hill Community Association.
Celeste, you're muted.
I have Steve on the phone, Celeste Hardister, Development Review Coordinator of the CHCA. Thank you.
Melissa Nash, Recorder.
Great. Thank you all, and thanks again for joining us. I see we're getting a few more people here. I was looking at the letters to the editor in the local last week, and I realized from some of the letters, there's a lot of uncertainty about how our process works and how projects go through our process. And I wanted to take a few minutes this evening to talk a little bit about how our process works and what the timelines have been and where they're headed, so that in your comments you have a good sense of where we are and how you can participate. So normally what happens when someone's seeking a variance, and I'll talk more about how a variance differs from a rezoning in a minute, but when a project applicant is seeking a variance, and that will be heard in front of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, they come to the Development Review Committee, which is the folks you just heard from, and they come twice to the Development Review Committee. The first time is just to announce their project, and when they announce their project, saying they're seeking a variance, and that they have been refused for that variance for procedural reasons from the city, so they're going to appeal that refusal. So when applicants come before us telling us that they're going to appeal a refusal from the city for a variance, we then say, great, welcome, and we direct them to one or several of our subcommittees to talk about how their project's going to work and ask for suggestions, recommendations, feedback about their project. Our big two subcommittees are Land Use Planning and Zoning, and the Historic District Advisory Committee, known as LUPZ and HDAC. And typically most applicants go in front of those committees and talk about their projects. And I'll talk about how this project did that a little bit later. So,
John, there's also streetscape.
Right, and so we have other committees, including streetscapes, hopefully, and some others that will activate as well. Thank you.
John, I just want to say that I spoke with Steve and he can hear us. He just, his video is not working and apparently his audio not working either, but he can hear us.
Okay, so well, it creates a lot of interesting possibilities. So after the LUPZ meetings and the HDAC and the streetscapes meetings, those subcommittees make recommendations, and those recommendations come back for a second time to the DRC, the Development Review Committee. That's this group of folks. And at that point, the DRC tries to see if it can come up with a consensus about whether to support or oppose or support with provisions a particular project. And that's where we are tonight. So this is the third time we're coming in front of the DRC because of some unusual circumstances. So hopefully what will happen tonight is the DRC will make a motion either supporting, opposing, or with particular provisions about the 30 West Highland project. And that motion will go forward to the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board, who will hear it in about 2 weeks, and they will decide whether they want to recommend or oppose the project. Their recommendation, again, potentially with provisions, will go forward to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So again, to reiterate from here, we're going to hopefully have a recommendation tonight that will go forward to the Chestnut Hill Community Association. The Chestnut Hill Community Association Board will make a recommendation, and that will go forward to the ZBA, Zoning Board of Adjustment. Now, what's important is that every single one of you can participate in all three of those meetings. You can participate in tonight's meeting, and we encourage you to do so. And when is the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board meeting? Or Celeste?
The 22nd.
The 22nd, and that's
Thursday the 22nd.
And that will be an open meeting as well. And then you can also sign up to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to give testimony there as well. And I don't have a date for that yet, but we'll let you know when it is. So
April 28th.
April 28th. So we're sort of on a fast track here, but there will be lots of opportunities for people to participate. What was unusual about this time is we, at the last HDAC the last DRC meeting a month ago, we didn't have a consensus, and we decided to form a subcommittee to see if they could come to, the subcommittee could work with the project sponsors to look at some potential modifications of the project that would make maybe not everybody happy, but a bunch of people happy. And we were very happy to have that subcommittee. It was composed of 3 members of the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee, 3 Chestnut Hill Conservancy representatives, and 3 representatives of the community. And I just want to thank them for their hard work. They've done a tremendous amount of work. I think they've had probably half a dozen or maybe as many as a dozen different meetings, really trying to make this project better on your behalf. They may not have come up with consensus, but I just want to express my personal gratitude to everyone who served on the committee and did their best to try and represent our community and make this project better. So you'll be hearing from some of those folks a little later, but thank you first in advance. Now, the DRC does not, the group tonight does not decide things on the basis of community consensus. We don't take a vote of all the participants and see what the majority thinks or doesn't think of all the participants. I think we have, at this point, 80 people in the Zoom meeting. It's not a majority consensus. Instead, it is a majority vote of the members of the DRC, and those are the folks who represented themselves tonight as members of the DRC. So you'll have a chance to have your say, but what we don't do is to total up all the pros and all the cons and determine our recommendation that way. What usually happens is we make a recommendation based on a majority vote of the Development Review Committee, and I know a number of you have been talking to some members of the DRC already. Okay, so what's a variance? And a lot of people don't know the difference between a variance and a rezoning. When you look at a zoning category on the map, like RSA or RSD or RMX, the R means residential, and it usually pertains to four things about how someone can use their property: the land use, whether it's residential or commercial or industrial; the minimum property dimensions, how big a property has to be in order to have a structure on it. And typically a residential property usually has to be about a minimum of 5,000 square feet. The height and bulk limitations, how tall the building can be and what its massing can be, what its length, width, depth, and height are. Those are dimensional requirements. And lastly, any required setbacks. So if you look on the city's website, and you look at all these zoning ordinances, for each zoning category, you'll see permitted land uses, minimum property dimensions, height and bulk requirements, and required setbacks. And those define what a developer or applicant or property owner can do with their property. So how does a variance fit in? With a variance, the applicant is asking for an exception to one or two of those provisions. So they may be in a residential area and they're asking to develop their property in commercial use. Or in this case, they may be in a commercial area and they're asking for an exception to develop it in residential use. Or they may ask for a height exception, or they may ask for a setback exception, or they may ask for a bulk exception. They're asking for an exception to only apply to that property, not to apply to all the other zoning categories or designations or areas, but just to that property. So in this case, we have an applicant who is applying for a variance for one exception, that is a use exception for the 30 West Highland property. They're not changing the lot dimensions, they're not changing the allowable height and bulk, and they're not changing the setbacks. They're asking for one exception, and that is what the ZBA will consider when it meets in a few weeks. Should a variance be given to allow what is currently a commercially zoned property to have residential uses? So what does the ZBA look for when it makes that decision about whether to grant a variance? Because in talking about the project tonight, we want to make sure that we're on point for the things that the Zoning Board of Adjustment will look at when they decide whether to give or to deny that variance. And they look at 5 things. I realize this is, in my past life, I was a college professor, and I'm sort of drifting into that again, but I think this is useful detail as to how projects are approved or not approved by the ZBA and what sort of arguments people want to make. The first thing the ZBA asks is the applicant's request reasonable and within the broader use, massing, height, and setback requirements of the surrounding zoning districts? That is, they don't want to give an exception that allows, that's open-ended, that allows an applicant to do a 20-story building in an area that is a 2 or 3 or 4-story building. So is the request reasonable within the broader context of that in terms of land uses and bulk and height of that neighborhood or that community? So the first question, is it a reasonable request? Second, is the request supported by an existing city planning or city zoning policy? And in this case, those are the policies that are written in the city's comprehensive plan, which is Philadelphia 2035, which lists the sorts of things that the city would like to see happen in its boundaries in terms of development. So the second thing the ZBA will ask is, how does the applicant's proposal relate to existing city policies and plans? Is it consistent? The third, is there precedent for this request? Have we granted similar variances in the past? We want to make sure that ZBA wants to make sure that its actions are consistent across all its decisions. Now we get to the nub of the issue that the ZBA is going to talk about and that we're talking about tonight, which is will the applicant's plans create no or few demonstrably adverse impacts on surrounding properties? So is the proposal going to adversely affect surrounding properties in the neighborhood? Is it going to, for example, create a lot of traffic that can't be mitigated, or create loss of light or views, or create certain environmental, stormwater, or vegetation impacts? Is it going to lead to unaccommodated parking? Is it going to adversely affect property values? So is this project going to adversely affect the community and the neighbors? And if it is, has the applicant made reasonable attempts to mitigate those adverse effects? So the ZBA wants to know, will the neighbors and community be worse off if this project goes ahead? And how can they document that it would be worse off if the project goes ahead? And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight. Will this project generate adverse effects? The final criteria the ZBA uses is if they don't approve the applicant's request, would it create an unnecessary financial or material hardship? In other words, will it create a burden for the applicant not to grant a variance? And can that burden be reasonably lifted in some way? Now, I should say that the ZBA does not rule on design. It's not design review. We do have design review in the city, but it's for larger projects than this one. So the ZBA is not primarily interested in design, materials, things like that, or look or style or aesthetics, except as a bad design would create negative impacts. So if there's a design that's regarded as bad and it would create negative impacts, then that's really the only way the ZBA gets involved in design. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the history of this project so that you know where we are. This project, 30 West Highland, was first brought to the Development Review Committee in September of 2020 as an advisory as to what would be forthcoming when the refusal from the city for the variance came. That refusal came in October. The DRC had its intake meeting at that point, and the project was referred to Land Use Planning and Zoning. It was also referred to HDAC, and it was referred to Streetscapes. So in the first DRC meeting, rather than review the project, the DRC referred it to its subcommittees. In February, the HDAC announced that it was opposed to the project in its current form. Also in February, the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee announced that it was supported the project with a few suggested revisions. And the Streetscapes Committee also met and I believe announced that it supported the project. So at the end of February, we had two committees not supporting the project, two committees supporting the project and one not supporting the project. The DRC, and many of you were involved, met in March a month ago. And at that point, there was no consensus. So we formed our subcommittee of 3 members of Land Use Planning and Zoning, 3 neighborhood representatives, and 3 representatives of the community of the Conservancy. That subcommittee has been working very hard for the last month, meeting with itself, but also meeting with the applicants to see if there could be some common ground around the proposal and its design. And that subcommittee is going to report its recommendations back tonight after we hear from the applicant. I understand, and Patricia, you may report on this, that the HDAC met again, I believe it was last night, and my understanding is they're still opposed, but perhaps you can talk about that a little bit later. So tonight's DRC meeting hopefully will emerge with a motion recommending or opposing or recommending with modifications the proposal. That recommendation will go forward to the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board in 2 weeks. And then it will go forward a few days later to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So again, all of you who are here tonight can talk tonight about your feelings about the project. You can talk to the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board in 2 weeks, and you can talk again to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. But bear in mind, when you go, if you go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, they will want to hear from you as to whether there are particular adverse impacts on your property or your life or the community or your neighborhood that you feel should be addressed by the project. Okay, I think I've said all I need to say. I'm going to ask Celeste and Ann if I've missed anything. So let me just say again, how can you be involved? Well, you can speak up tonight. Once we've heard from the presenters and our committees, just indicate in the chat that you'd like to speak, and Celeste will keep track of that and then call on people to speak. Please limit, if you want to make a statement, please keep it to 2 minutes or less. Otherwise, ask a question, and you can ask any question you'd like. You can attend the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board meeting in 2 weeks. You can attend the ZBA meeting. You have to sign up for that, but you can do that on their website in 2.5 weeks. And you can run for the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board. If you like what's happening, or if you don't like what's happening, and you want to have a bigger say, we'd love to have you think about running for the Chestnut Hill Community Association Board and contributing that way. So there's just lots of things for you to do, and I hope you're getting as excited as I am about that. So let me call at this point on, let me see if there are any, Celeste or Ed, did I miss anything in my presentation?
No, I don't think so.
I have nothing to add, except that I will say that when it comes time to reading comments, that if there are a lot that are very similar, I may not read all of them, recalling that last time there were many, many comments, more than we could handle in a meeting.
And it's also worth noting that we save all the comments. So if you're making asides to your friends, or you're asking someone to dinner or something like that, don't do that in the chat because it will be recorded for posterity. If you do it in the chat, make sure your comment goes to the person you want it to and not to everyone. The default is your comment goes to everyone. So we wouldn't want anyone to say anything untoward, because it will be there in 150 years for everyone to see. So use the chat, but make sure if you send it to everyone, it's what you want everyone to see. If it's not something you want everyone to see, direct it to a friend, or better yet, use your private email for that. Okay, with that, let me call on Henry and Larry to present the project as it now stands.
Okay, thank you, John. I do want to recognize that Henry O'Reilly is the owner of the project, who's on the call. I think Henry may be in transit right now, but I saw that he is on the call. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Carl Primavera, who's Henry's attorney, who's also here with us this evening. I see there's Carl. There are 4 pages of people, at least on the screen I have, so I can't see everyone here, but I know that Henry and Carl are here. I guess we'd also like to, so on behalf of Henry, I'd like to start off and just to forward our appreciation to the subcommittee members who have spent a lot of time working with us on this project. I think we've actually made good progress together, and feel that there've been a lot of good comments that have been made. And I can just assure you that we have listened to the comments very carefully and closely, and where they made sense to incorporate, we've actually done that, and we'll show you that as we go through this presentation. The presentation is going to be basically, I need to first just acquaint everybody briefly with the zoning aspects of things, what we're asking for, what we're not asking for. And then since there's a lot of concern about the fact that we're not proposing to reuse the existing building, I want to briefly discuss the reasons for that. And then we're going to basically just describe the benefits of our scheme for the community, and then the changes we've made, and in addition, some of the things that actually Henry has agreed to do, which are peripheral to the project, but of all benefit to the community. So we'll be happy to take questions. So with that, I'll share the screen. And Tim, I would just say historic building is, it's not that it's getting in the way of profit. There's more to it than that, my friend.
Sure there is.
Yes.
There's not.
Well, I would just ask you to have an open mind, and we don't go into a project, any project, and say we're going to tear that down.
You can get on with it. I don't want to interrupt. You can get on with it.
Yeah. So can everybody see this first slide? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the owner of the project, Henry O'Reilly, is third generation president of E.B. O'Reilly, which is a company that's been a family owned and operated company that's been in existence since 1954. And it's operated from this property for 50 years, since 1971. Henry was born and raised in Chestnut Hill, as was his wife. Longtime Chestnut Hill residents. And they intend to live at in one of these units on the property in the future. That's part of the plan of this. The nature of the project essentially is that it's a residential development of 8 townhomes organized along a tree-lined central garden walk. It's a planning idea that's familiar to people in Chestnut Hill. It's a muse kind of a scheme. As all the projects we work on, the planning aspect of things, the material usage, these are all things based upon what you'll find in the buildings and natural environment in which Chestnut Hill sits. We do, however, we are modern architects, and we do take advantage of modern construction techniques and improvements in everything's everywhere from building insulation, total energy usage, water usage, and we have to adhere to modern day code requirements from everybody from the water department to the Philadelphia Fire Department. So with that, so the existing site is 18,620 square feet. It's here's Germantown Avenue here, West Highland. This is 14, 16, 18, 20, and then this is the building at 30. This building here is 14 rear. This is the alley that is shared by everybody from the Community Association to Killian's and everybody, all these people in between. Just as a comparison, the adjacent residential district is RSA 3. That's all of the rest of Highland Avenue and Evergreen Avenue as well. And much of the unit block and several blocks west of Germantown Avenue, which would have a requirement of 2,250 square feet per unit. That would yield 8.3 units. We are proposing 8 units. So we believe that our proposal is generally meets the general density test of the site. The current impervious coverage of the property is 86%. There's basically a parking area here for 20-some cars and service vehicles. There's a driveway here that comes in to all this space. There's an additional garage back here, tool shed here. There is a small lawn in the back adjacent to 14 rear, but 86% of the site is impervious. There are a few shrubs here along this area. There are no trees at the site interior. There's one street tree out front. In terms of impact for adjacent owners, the current owner of 20 West Highland, their side view is of parked cars and traffic running in and out of here during the business day. There's a minimal vegetation screen between those parked cars and the side of the building, which is 4 and about 7 feet away from the property line. In addition to that, with 86% lot coverage and asphalt paving, there's quite a bit of heat gain from coming off that asphalt paving for that particular neighbor. Just in terms of the base zoning districts, John mentioned, went into the idea of commercial and residential districts. This is part of the property right here, and the other part of the property goes behind here. The properties, which would include Killian Hardware, here's Community Town Hall. These are all CMX1 at present. CA1 is actually a holdover automobile-related commercial activity. This was the Jones Oldsmobile site, as you may know, and this was all part of their service shops and everything coming up to the back. CA1 extends on into the next block. CMX1 along the avenue. And then west of the site, immediately west of the site is the public parking lot, which is also CA1. Immediately west of that, beginning for the rest of Highland, at West Highland is RSA 3. And just to put an outline how that overlaps with the property that is contained in our consolidated lot, which is this part of the property is CA1, the part on which the garage building sits, and then it's the rest of it back here is CMX1, and that is where 14 rears West Highland sits, and the last part of the alley, which is part of the property that was consolidated into this to become one lot. We're not asking for any rezoning of these properties. The bold headlines here are the Philadelphia City Planning Commission's plan for the future of these properties. So these CMX properties along Germantown Avenue are scheduled to be, or proposed to be, mapped CMX 2.5 by the Planning Commission. Along even these 4 residential properties here are actually scheduled to become CMX 2 from their current CMX 1. We inquired, but there is no, for some reason, no intention of changing the CA1 use, even though CA1 is pretty much obsolete in Chestnut Hill as a use. 60% of our property is in CA1. The remainder is in CMX 1. So in order to make a determination about what would be the governing zoning district, we had a dialogue with L&I, and the ruling they gave us was that CA1 would be the zoning district, that zoning district standards of CA1 would guide the development of the project. Now that's for the dimensional standards. Go through that in a second. And then there are use standards, and the use standards follow both CA1 and CMX1 according to their the location on the site where those districts occur. Within CA1, essentially, no residential uses are permitted as of right in CA1. And that is the reason we're before you this evening. In terms of the dimensional standards for the project on the left side of the page here, these are all listed. We're required to have 50 feet of street frontage. We have 80. 5,000 square feet. We have 18,620. Maximum occupied area in terms of percent on the lot, 60% is the maximum occupied area. Our current proposal is at 52.4%.
It's just ugly.
All right. We're looking at zoning
Yeah.
stuff here, ma'am.
Yeah, no, go straight.
Okay.
Here.
So if the rear minimum side yard, if used 5 feet, rear yard, if used 5 feet, the maximum height in this zoning district, 38 feet. So we comply with all of those. We went through a complete review of the zoning proposal with all the various entities that now review this thing simultaneously in the Eclipse system. There were no dimensional standard issues with the project. The only refusal here is a use refusal, as we thought there would be, because there's, as we say, multifamily housing is expressly prohibited in the CA1 and CMX1 commercial district. The other thing so that's the first one. The other thing is a bit of a technicality that we need need a zoning referral because we have in the CMX1 part of the site, there's a limit of 1 primary structure on the CMX1 property, and it happens that unit 6 of the project.
I just want to be counted.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. Okay, so that's that. Here's some of the streetscape. This is 14 through 20, and this is the scene at 30 West. This is after hours or any weekend hour. One of the things that doesn't happen here is that whereas there's a potential in a residential area that there could be eyes on the street and activity 24/7, 365 at an office environment during the weekends and evenings. Basically, it's a quiet place, lights off, just a lot of paving behind actually a non-compliant fence in the front of the property here. So we were asked to we looked at the building and say, okay, first of all, commercial usage is on the decline. And we've actually, for some time, spoken in Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee about the commercial district as shrinking some. And we've been trying to think of ways to deal with that on Germantown Avenue. This particular property the property across the street, Univest Bank is, I don't know, some of you I'm sure got the same letter I got in the mail that as of June 30, that bank will know that branch will no longer be there. That'll be vacant. We right now also have current vacancies at the Bank of America, which closed it temporarily a year ago. We have several right at Germantown and Highland, the Han Gallery and 3000 BC next to that. Those are also closed. So there's not a big need right now for commercial use here. We took a look at what it would mean if there was that. And even if you took the first floor of here, we need 9 parking spaces, which would be longer than the length of the existing building. And it would just extend into, if this was to be a mixed use development, it would extend into the residential area. If we did that as 90-degree parking, but first of all, we have, the building sits 2 feet and a half, 2 feet 2 inches to 2 feet 6 inches away from the adjacent property. It's 40 feet. We have 38 feet left. We need, for 90-degree parking in the city of Philadelphia, we need 42 feet. So we're 4 feet shy of that. So we can't do 90-degree parking for a commercial entity that, even though it happens now, when you go to apply for a new permit, you're going to be short and you're going to be refused for that. So we can't have parking that comes back out, which is what we would want. In terms of 60-degree parking, we could do that. 18 plus 18 is 36. We could do that, but that would drag all the cars. It's a one-way circulation back through the rest of the site and out the alley. There's been a lot of consternation about any additional traffic in that alley, and so the idea of having a regular traffic flow through there is just really an unacceptable condition for us. In terms of residential use, because of the building's location, the driveway would have to be pushed all the way over immediately adjacent to 20 West Highland. And then there would be only one location where all the vehicles coming in here for the property and all the pedestrian traffic for all the people visiting these folks would be coming down the same driveway, looking at a series of garage doors. Stormwater management, and we'll show you the scheme we have. There's really not much common space in here for enough area for stormwater management. And if we can't permit that, that's a real problem for us. The curb cut, it continues this sort of curb cut, walk. We actually think our solution, which places the curb cut closer to this, is actually a better resolution, as it puts all the residential in between those curb cuts. We also looked at the fire department access with this. Fire department is going to use this parking lot actually to fight any fire that would occur on any of these units, but they would want to take their hoses through here for these two units because they can't bring their truck down here. And the other thing is that if we try to make use of this building here, we're pushing this building back farther and farther towards this lawn and the adjacent plantings there. So I'm going to go to, So because the building is only 2.5 feet from the property line, we can't put any new windows on the whole west face of the building without taking out wall and setting that line back to at least 5 feet, 3 feet, really 5 feet to get any reasonable amount of windows there. It's a 2-story structure in a location that is more than ever becoming a 3-story plus location in terms of density and its proximity to the avenue. Building has thick masonry walls, which are at once expensive to modify and would require a steel structure to support them. I've had experience with a number of residences and structures in Chestnut Hill, including some people on this call, and making these openings requires a pretty major effort on the part of us to do even one. The roof structure is going to be unable to support additional floor loads, so that steel frame would have to extend up through the roof. So we'd be modifying the front elevation, which would be one of the only places we could get additional light, natural light to come into this building, and we'd be bringing up something up through the roof and modifying the structure. So at a certain point, we're feeling like this loses its historical connection because it's not the same building you're looking at now. In terms of the remainder of the site, it's just not enough area for a viable number of units left. And the possible units are not dependably marketable according to our study and assessment of it. Also, the 38-foot tall building, because it would probably be pushed closer to the back, as we've already said. The last thing just to discuss here is that the building is laden with about 10,000 square feet of asbestos. That is all the interior face of all the peripheral walls, the ceilings, and a good part of the floors. It's actually in the middle of the 3 coats of plaster. So reusing this building, making modifications to it is a very expensive, difficult process, and we'd still, in selling these, we would still be letting everybody know that they're living in a place that basically has asbestos. Our strategy in proposing to remove the building is to actually remove the asbestos during demolition and then preserve and reuse the clean exterior white of stone in the new townhomes for the ground walls and the garden walls and the jack arches for the openings, the entries to each of the units and certain openings that we'll show you. So that's how we came to believe we needed to make the proposal we have here. Last fall, this was a proposal, number 1, to remove but repurpose the stone from 30 West Highland Avenue. Number 2, to remove and rebuild on the footprint of 14 rear. Provide a scheme with 8 townhomes organized around a garden walk that would actually have a trellis entry here, and it would run the property. So that adjacent neighbor at 20 West now is looking at trees and a pedestrian walkway beyond a fence and garden environment here instead of parking lot and traffic. And everybody who walks by here then is looking at the same planted green kind of a space all the way down this block to where there are a pair of trees around this public parking lot here. So the other aspect of that is that the circulation for the vehicles happens around the periphery on pervious driveway pavement. And this is most of the traffic, all the traffic actually inbound could be here, wrapping around here, even units 7 and 8. And then all the 1 through 6 outbound traffic would be here. 7 and 8 could do either one, but there's really not much use of this back lane. People could try to use that. The only other people coming here would be unit 7 if you're 8 or 8 if you're 7, or they would actually exit the place. They'd be the only ones exiting here. So there's already one person who comes in and exits via the alley. So essentially it's about a wash in terms of traffic for there. So instead of 20, 25, 30 vehicles coming in and out of here, it's basically 12 to 14 vehicles coming in and out on this side, a couple coming out here. In terms of tree plantings, there were no internal trees. We have at least 8 to 10 in the middle of this, several street trees when we started out, and several trees at the back corners of the property. Then so between then and now, we've actually done a lot of work with the subcommittee. And here are some of the features, some of the site plan changes we've made during the course of this. In terms of the site plan. So one of the big moves, first moves we made was to bring the building back 7 feet to align the face of our building. I mean, we started out with the face of our building where the face of the existing building was. Seemed like a logical thing at the time. But there was a feeling that we should move this back so that all these brick fronts, since we actually using the same kind of Roman brick that are on these 4 houses here, these are all back here. So we've moved the building back. We've condensed some of these units so that we can have that alignment there. So that was a major move to make that happen. That allowed us to have additional space here to plant trees, not only at the street, but behind the street. So you now walk through a series of trees here, and we have space for a pocket park that we're willing to work on with members of the community to properly recognize the history of this street as a history that had a series of garages along here, many of which across the street are still in use. We also secured permission from, we're actually in the midst of that, to allow planting along the periphery of the site along the west side. In addition to stepping the face of the building back 7 feet, we've actually stepped the top floor of the units back. So in fact, the length of our project, which was 149 feet at start, is now 14 feet, almost 14 feet less than that. So we've decreased at the top where everybody's seeing it, the total length of the project by almost 14 feet. We've further reduced the site coverage from 54 to 52.5 and the impervious coverage down to 58.5. And just so since there's already been a comment here tonight about it's all about greed, these are just several of the peripheral expenses that have been offered up. The features have been offered up by Henry in the course of our proposal and work with the subcommittee and just the community. The first one was a requirement. All these benefit the community though. The first one was a requirement that we take extend a 24-inch diameter storm sewer all the way down to the connect points on our property. That is at our expense. That's probably about a $200,000 expense. Second thing is the inclusion of plantings and furniture and features here for a pocket park in the front. even though there's no other entity along West Highland Avenue that has any, really, the property that has any public amenity, except the fire station, which will actually have a little park with a bench there. That could be another 25,000. The third one of these street trees, that could be another $50,000. The fourth thing is a commitment to include stormwater management and cleanup up of the entire alley here as something for the alley, all the property owners on the alley. That might be $100,000. We don't know. That's $400,000 of things that are going to be done for this project that are in addition to constructing the townhouses. So while some people may say, gee, you need so many, you want so many units, you want so much density, and we want the density that the site that falls out of a study of the square footage of the site, and we need the density because we want to provide all these amenities that are at the periphery of the project, in addition to the using quality materials that are going to last a long time for the project. This is where we were February 11th on the street. We had brick at one time all the way up to our 38-foot height limit. We then looked at, we could develop a more significant cornice here that would relate to the two-story houses next to us. Those are the only two-story houses on this block, on this side of the block. On the other side, there is one two-story house further down the block. This is a later one where we actually stepped the building back on both sides at the top floor, still had brick coming up the west facade. And then this is the one we've presented most recently, which is actually one which steps the building back over 3 feet, as much as over 4 feet at the very ends of it, from the brick face at the street, the brick face now being in line with this. So now our primary cornice here, this is, by the way, is 38 feet. This is code compliant right here. This is really now an attic story, and this is at 28 feet 10, under 30 feet. This is where the height of where we are now. So here's where we were, interim ones. Here's the current proposal. You can see that the brick on at 14 and 16 is actually, there's a taller building than we have as it faced right on the street. This is 34.9 up to here, and the finials are another 3.5 feet above that. 31.10 to the top of that pediment. So here are some of the features: no brick above the second floor, third floor setback, balconies on both sides of the first floor and the third floor in terms of have the building have a relationship with the street and eyes on the street, and sense of activity. We also have introduced an entry to unit number 1 on the street, which is below this balcony right here. And the public park, that's another, public pocket park, another one. So those are some of the features of the building as it's on the street. Here's how the building sits in a larger context. Here's these current ones. Here are the buildings next door. It's a brick that comes up to the second floor. This is the house beyond that, is actually 3 stories to its cornice line, and then it has a 4th floor. So there's another house right there. That may be an attic floor, but it is a 4th floor, unless that's a very tall room with clear story light, in which case still reads as 4 floors. So our 4th floor building is not the only 4th floor building on the block. The other thing I just want to say about the features here is that we have actually incorporated the jack arch. What you don't see in the current facade is that there's actually an opening in the middle of the current building. We're going to reuse those stones here for the arch that's would signify the idea of the original opening of the existing building into our project. So these are just a couple more of these, and just to here is just basically again to show you the future of this is at the height limit, and then this is 45 feet high, which would be what would be allowable to be built on the corner properties along Germantown Avenue. Just in terms of impact on the street, from where we started February 16th to where we are now in terms of the building being moved back, that 7 feet and additional plantings being possible here so that there's really a trees that you're walking through. You can see the change in the impact of the building on the street. Here's where we were again in February, a very continuous, maybe monolithic top floor. We began to look at articulating that. This was still brick at the top here. We then took a look at the idea of removing these blades and actually shaping these bays and setting this back further. This rendering didn't quite get all those in there yet, but then we looked at this and we finally removed all the blade walls at the top of a series of bays. These bays actually, we're going to recalibrate those at 45 degrees instead of 30, but it's kind of a detail here. And then basically eliminated all the brick at the corner and just set the entire piece of this back so that essentially, again, this brick cornice, basically the cornice wraps around it just under 29 feet right here. Here's the way we were. Here's the way it sits now. Just want to say that the middle four, so now what we have is a deep recess between this pavilion at the end, this pavilion at the end. I know it doesn't read ideally here, with a planter and balconies in here in this space that's a recess. The middle 4 units of this are 93 feet wide. That's essentially, that is the width, that's the length of the existing building that sits on the site right now. Then it's separated 7.5 feet. We have a 14-foot wide end pavilion. So that's the 135 feet 8 inches of the building at present. So detail of how that looks. In terms of the, again, the southwest, it's the same progression. Back to this, all the corners of these buildings are set back over 3 feet, including over here at units 7 and 8, which we actually moved. We had a different strategy for those and moved those quite a bit west from their garages so that it's actually only a 1-story structure adjacent to the apartment that's next to this property that's quite close to the property line. Again, because we have the circulation of the vehicles peripheral to this, it pushes our building 15 feet back from the property line, and then this another 4 feet back up here. So we've actually been able to modulate this. This is just a really brief thing to show that at 7 and 8 at the top floor, we've actually set pretty much the entire floor in from the periphery below. Thank you very much.
Larry, thanks. This is Henry. Celeste, would you mind pulling up the 2 documents that I forwarded to you that you asked yesterday? Would that be possible?
I can do that. If you can just give me a minute, please.
So what I'd like to just go over quickly is not necessarily developmental issues, but more operational issues. When we met with the subcommittee prior to our first meeting, they issued us a 21-point memo of suggestions, recommendations, demands for changes to the project, both developmentally and operationally. And so I wanted to address that because we have been talking about that with the subcommittee for a number of meetings. So I'll wait till Celeste can get that up if that's possible. So just to go over this, what was asked of us after we went through a number of the developmental changes was to provide a list of the things that we had changed up from the initial concept to today. And Larry went through most of these, but I tried to do this in a bullet point form to give everyone a kind of general idea of what this is. First being, we moved the front of the building back 7 feet to line up with the adjacent townhouses. We created the public pocket park designed for public access. We added an array of trees on the Highland Avenue frontage so you would walk in the sidewalk and be surrounded by trees. One of the comments came that it looked like it was the side of the building, and so what we did was we created the door on the front of unit number 1 to kind of mimic that as a front of the space. As Larry said, we reduced the size of the 3rd floor, not once, not twice, but 3 times to setbacks. We added setbacks on the 3rd floor of unit 1 and unit 6. We also added balconies to reduce the mass on the northwest and northeast corners, reduce the site coverage from 54 to 52%, reduce the impervious coverage, which went when we increased the pervious coverage and reduced the impervious coverage originally from 86 to 60 and then again to 58%. Change the sizes on units 7 and 8, reduce the massing of the west elevation to the 141 scheme that Larry showed you. We also changed the west facade with some balconies and angled walls. And we removed those dividers that we did not like the right. So the original overall mass from the way beginning of the concept of the project to today has been reduced by roughly 10%. And then in addition, one of the things we did was, as Larry said, that we tried to look at just density and what we were allowed to build. And there's a ratio that's used by developers and cities and municipalities throughout the country, which is the fixed area ratio. Our building currently, based on before these last iterations, had a fixed area ratio of 1.36. And just as a comparison, and I'm not doing this, and I'm only doing this for reference, is the Shawnee Street project, the Enclave, utilizing their literature and their promotional information, has a fixed area ratio of 1.56. Celeste, could you pull up the other page? So one of the other things that the subcommittee had requested, taking feedback and comments from the neighbors, was operational issues. So what I tried to do is identify these operational issues. And what I'd like to do is ask Carl Primavera to kind of explain operational issue number 1, which the question was, what type of entity is this going to be? Carl, would you mind explaining the HOA?
Sure. So in Pennsylvania, there's the Community Act, Community Association Act, and it has certain requirements for any either homeowners association or condominium association. And it's a consumer protection legislation, but it's also done to provide a mechanism for the type of developments that we're talking about. So here, each townhouse would be separately owned in fee simple, which is basically the way most homes are owned, but there would be a community association. Each homeowner would be a member of the association, and the association, as a nonprofit entity under Pennsylvania law, would have officers elected by the residents, bylaws, and the types of things that they manage would be the snow removal, trash removal, grass cutting and trimming, maintenance of any other common areas that would be, for example, the easement that is parallel to Germantown Avenue, which Larry has mentioned. So it provides a way of having responsibility so that the Tower of Babel can't get in the way of doing things. So if you didn't have the association under Pennsylvania law, and the neighbors or the residents of this development couldn't get along, it would be hard to manage these common areas or common elements. But because of this structure, which is very common both in the suburbs and in the city, and I live in Drummore, which is the same deal. We own our homes individually, but all the driveways and the grass areas are common areas. And you have the benefit of owning your own home, but also having common, we'll call it cooperation among the various private owners in the development. So it lasts in perpetuity. It can't be created and then it disappears. It's permanent the way something legally under legislation would be. And it's very typical, and it provides the assurances that the things that will be negotiated and the things that will be promised will be honored and be enforced if necessary.
Thank you, Carl. Because that was one of the questions that came up initially from the subcommittee and subsequently in many of the subcommittee meetings, how this is going to be handled. The other issue came up in the from the subcommittee in terms of operational issues, is we had shown that we were going to utilize the alleyway between Killian's and 14 West, and how was that going to happen? What we have done and what we have in the process of doing, and with Carl's help, is developing a document to be able to memorialize what we were going to do, and that would go with the land as we discussed. But basically, we're going to fix up that alleyway so it's a usable alleyway, maintain the stormwater management on that alleyway, and we would also tie that back to the HOA to maintain that alleyway going forward. One of the other issues that they was discussed was moving the driveway, as Larry showed, on the entrance to 1 through 6, and could we find a way to work with Acadia, the real REIT that owns the driveway back there. We approached them. They were not interested in doing that. And one of the other things that was discussed was about putting signage about walking passengers. And we felt that we didn't feel there was a need for signage to let people know there was a driveway. And we thought that was not in the best interest of the community. So we did not plan to do that. The other issue that came up was deliveries. How are we going to handle all the Amazon trucks and FedEx trucks and UPS trucks that were going to come to this development? If you note, for the people that live on Highland Avenue, the front of my existing building is a loading zone. It's been that way for the 50 years that I've been there, and that's designated by the city. So any deliveries to that project would be done at that loading zone, and that loading zone would be utilized for that. The other thing was about trash collection. And so while it's my contention that they should be able to utilize the city services that they pay taxes for, we understand the nature of not having a lot of cans on the street. So we are in the process of exploring private trash collection. And again, that will be memorialized in the HOA, but we will be glad to put that in writing with a document that the subcommittee had asked us to memorialize of the things that we had agreed to. One of the other things that was talked about was snow removal. And again, snow removal will be handled on site. And again, that will be memorialized within the HOA and responsibility of the HOA, but we can memorialize that in an additional document that could go with the land. Site maintenance, again, will be in the HOA, and that will be required, as Carl said, that is typical in all HOAs. So who maintains the common grass areas, who maintains the trees, who's doing the maintenance on those. One of the other issues we have as part of our design, and one of Susie and I's important things about this, is to be as green as possible. So we have pervious pavement on the driveways for this. Now, pervious pavement requires maintenance for that, at least recommended maintenance from the manufacturer. So what we will do is we'll put into this document and into the HOA the maintenance requirements that the manufacturer recommends for that. So that's kind of some of the things that were asked to address from the subcommittee on the operational issues prior to our first meeting of the subcommittee. So that's all I really have at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Carl. At this point, before we take questions, I'd like to ask Bill O'Keefe, who was the chair of the subcommittee, to report on what the subcommittee's recommendations are. Bill, are you still online?
I'm here.
Thanks.
Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will try to be succinct and keep things moving along here. A lot of my report has been covered by others. We did have 9 members of the committee meeting over the past month. We think we had 12, possibly 13 meetings, both with and without the applicants. The majority of our discussions actually could be categorized in 3 different ways. One, of course, was issues relating to the existing building. Second would be issues relating to the design of the proposed buildings, and the third might be how the project is going to operate when built. And I might note that the subcommittee was unable to arrive at a unanimous decision. So I am representing the majority viewpoint. There is minority viewpoint. John Landis, I've been away from the computer a lot of the day, so I don't know if you've lined up a discussion of the minority viewpoint, but I'll go ahead with recapping the majority viewpoint. The demolition of the existing building is a sore spot for many. So we did our best to make the applicant defend their scheme and position. And the committee also offered different schemes, different ideas. And we asked the applicant to counter our proposals. Without going into detail about each and everything, the majority of the subcommittee believes that the applicant did offer a reasonable defense of their scheme and why it was going ahead in this format, and also was able to explain why some of the ideas which we thought were great actually might have seemed that way, but didn't really work from a site planning viewpoint. Many of the design changes that we were able to affect, Larry McEwen has noted. A lot of time was spent on the Highland Avenue facade and its relationship to the street. And on the west elevation, the setback was changed to align with the existing structures. The top floor was stepped back. The west elevation was developed into a 1-4-1 rhythm with the bay windows. The unit separation walls were significantly scaled back. The streetscape at Highland Avenue was improved, and we also have the we think we have the agreement with Acadia for the planting along the property line. Henry went through a lot of the operational issues. That was a concern of ours once the project was built. How is it going to operate? He's been very cooperative and straightforward answering our questions. And so when all was said and done, the subcommittee majority opinion was to support the variance, subject to all the design changes that we agreed to going forward, the operational methodologies that we agreed to being incorporated into a homeowner's document, or whatever document will govern the operation of the project, and that an agreement, an enforceable agreement with the CHCA be executed to be recorded with a deed and run with the property. Not being an attorney, I don't know if that's a proper language, but that's the idea. So briefly, that's the past month of the subcommittee for the majority vote. And as I say, John, I don't know if you lined up someone to speak for the minority.
Can I ask what the vote count was, please?
Is that public?
I'll leave that up to the committee as to whether they want to respond on that, but let's leave that for the question time. Thank you, Bill. So but before we get to the minority view, I just want to again thank all the 9 members of the subcommittee, particularly the layman folk who aren't part of LUPZ. You know, when you move to Chestnut Hill, maybe we ought to put a little note in the welcome that you get saying sooner or later, you're going to have to be on one of our wonderful subcommittees and give up your free time. But we really do appreciate the contribution. And Bill, I know you didn't sign up to chair the committee, but I heard you did a terrific job. So you have our appreciation. Is there anybody on the call who was part of the group that drafted the minority report and would like to touch on its highlights? I don't have names attached to that report, but if anybody's on the call who was the author of that, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to present your perspective.
I think you'll find if you look at the memo that was sent to Bill O'Keefe, that it was addressed to the community association.
I'm sorry, Ross, I didn't hear all that.
I'm sorry, I'm advised that my audio is not functioning as well as it might. The memo was addressed to Bill O'Keefe from Dennis, Lucy, and I, who are two members of the subcommittee. And we expressed our dissent to not approve or recommend that the community association not approve the zoning variance as being in many ways non-responsive to the multiple inputs that the community provided about this project through a community forum, through the chat in the last DRC call, through representation of Dennis and I on the committee. And these mostly center around the thought that this is a precedent-setting building that is establishing a new norm that is not in keeping with the neighborhood. This is a building that is fundamentally 4 floors of heated space plus a roof deck and, quote, pilot house that towers above what are single, 1.5, 2.5 story at its most unusual 3 and 4 story buildings. This would be a significant departure from the village feel and concept that policy documents have been around for a long time. There are operational issues that still remain unanswered. I will invite people to think about the movement of traffic exiting these townhomes, making a left-hand turn onto Highland Avenue. What happens when somebody's making a right-hand turn out of the Weaver's Way parking lot, a left-hand turn out of the parking lot across the street? It's very confusing. The fundamental issue is that has been articulated again and again is size, mass, and density. This is a departure from the community norm. These concerns were expressed in the Development Review Committee of October 20th of last year, and these issues have been raised again and again and again and have not been answered. The fundamental bottom line is that this is too much development in too small a space that does not relate to the community, does not relate to the street, does not relate to the pedestrian access and egress of this area. Many concerns which are in our report. I will leave it at that. We would recommend, there are those of us that would recommend that the community association not grant the variance unless there are substantive changes to the plan.
Let's see. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Ross, thank you very much. I appreciate your stepping up to give that report. This was a hard case, and I know everybody who worked on it, whether they supported or dissented, worked really hard, and we really appreciate the contribution. That's my unhappy cat in the back you hear. We're going to get to the committee reports in a minute, but at this point, I'd like to ask if any DRC members have any questions of either the development team, the subcommittee, or the dissenting subcommittee. So now, if you're on the DRC board and you have any questions that you'd like answered about anything that was presented tonight, now's your chance to step up and ask those questions. Not a time for statements, but a time for questions. Dan, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, I have two questions of Larry and Henry. One, I guess, Larry, could you describe what the ghost pediment is? I mean, I
Okay,
saw, it looked like it was, I mean, I see that it is kind of responding to roof lines in the area, but could you just talk a little bit more about that?
it's actually, yeah, it's actually just a nod to, can you see that?
Yes.
So it's really just it's incorporated into the railing at the deck, but it's essentially the gable of the building that was there. 30 West Highland.
Okay.
Just as the arch opening right down here is the same arch opening that's actually behind that box bay window that's on the building right now. What exists behind there is an arch opening that it was the original garage entry to the building. So it's another way of you know, it's an homage.
Right. No, and that's a new feature, which I think is a nice one. Thank you. Question about the HOA. So when, I mean, I've heard of HOAs, but I've not experienced one myself. So I understand that there will be certain requirements and they will be immortalized. And if somebody buys a unit, they have to abide by it. So are the costs that are part of the HOA, that's part of what a buyer assumes, and that is not something that's negotiable? I mean, I guess I'm, wondering, for clarification that we wouldn't have a situation where the owners decided they don't want to spend the required costs of taking care of the grounds and the snow. I mean, can they do it at a lesser level, or how does that all work?
Carl, would you mind answering that? Because you're familiar with that.
Right. Well, first of all, there has to be a budget established as part of the, we'll call it disclosure to buyers, so they know what the fee will be. There's also typically a contribution by the developer to kind of start the process. I would say this, these homes are going to be expensive, as all new homes are. And the people who live there are going to ask the same questions that the community is asking, which is, can we rely upon our neighbors to be good neighbors and to support the high level of construction and design? Well, the reality is, if you live in a row home, you are more at risk to having what I would call an eccentric neighbor that doesn't take care of the property, because there's no HOA to compel that neighbor to behave. So in a way, these community associations are an added way to make sure that your neighbors aren't the guy who inherits a house and he's never worked and he doesn't paint and he doesn't put out the trash and he's got an old boat in the backyard. So that's one reason people like these formats. It adds a little comfort to the fact that you're not going to have an eccentric neighbor.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Larry, do you want to unshare your image?
John, are you there? John
Yeah,
Landis? I lost you.
I lost my connection, so I think I have it back. So let's see, thanks for picking up the slack there. Let me just get back online here. So sorry, folks, for some reason I lost my connection. What did I miss? Did we have any other questions from any of the other DRC committee members? Okay, if not, let's hear from Patricia Cove on behalf of the HDAC. Hope you didn't lose your connection, Patricia.
Well, no, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Well, first of all, the Conservancy wants to express its appreciation to Henry O'Donnell and Larry McEwen and also the members of the subcommittee for all the efforts made in the improvements of the project. But there still remained some specific aspects of the project which prevented the HDAC from supporting the variance requested. And I'll just review those specific reasons. The Chestnut Hill Conservancy works to preserve historic buildings, especially those recognized as contributing or significant in the Chestnut Hill National Register District. We cannot support the demolition of an existing structure where adaptive reuse may be possible, but has not been sufficiently considered, in our opinion. Secondly, the preliminary meeting and the normal RCO process meetings were presented with an overall building program that we felt was too advanced for us to manage within the boundaries that had already been set. Thirdly, a vote of support for this particular variance would serve as a precedent for threatened historic structures moving forward. So for specifically those reasons, we voted for non-support of the variance that was requested.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Appreciate it for your clarity. Let's see. Jan, are you still there? I believe, Jan Album, I believe the Streetscapes Committee has previously had a recommendation about this project in its earlier iteration. Do you want to recall what that was? Can you recall what that was?
I can, I have it in front of me. I just wanted to say that again, that while I'm a neighbor on Highland Avenue, I do represent the Streetscape Committee on DRC. And in February, we reviewed the project as it existed at that point. Larry and Henry presented it, and we reviewed the items that were within the purview of the Streetscape. And we agreed to support the project as long as the following items were confirmed by the applicant: that the complex will not have external signage, such as the name of the complex, just have the number of the complex, that external lighting is for safety only, that internal lighting will be blocked from spilling onto the sidewalk or onto other residential buildings, that lanterns or other similar fixtures will be on each garden wall, that at a minimum 12 mature trees will be planted on the property, that Larry and the client will verify that the existing large tree that is slated for removal is not a heritage tree, and confirmation that the color of the brick is similar to that used nearby.
Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. Let's see, the other committee that reviewed this back in February was Land Use Planning and Zoning. I believe they voted to support the prior proposal by a vote, I believe, Gene, you can correct me if I'm wrong, of 4-1 at the time. They've not met and heard about this new proposal, but I believe that 3 of the members of the LUPZ, at least 3 were on the subcommittee and voted in the majority. So I'll just let that stand where it is. So I think now we have reached the time for comments from the community. All I ask is that if you want to make a statement or a comment, that you try and keep it to 2 minutes so that we can accommodate as many people as possible. If you want to ask a question, feel free to direct your question to anybody who's spoken previously. We'll try and go as long as we can to accommodate everybody. And again, the way to do this is use the chat to direct a chat message to Celeste Hardister, indicating that you would like to speak or ask a question. Celeste, do we have anybody on deck?
Yeah, actually, I'll go back to the first question that was raised at the beginning of this meeting, which is what were the LUPZ conditions for their support?
Gene,
So-
are you able to report on that?
You need to
Uh,
unmute yourself,
Yeah.
Jean.
I'm sorry, I have to dig through my stack here to find that.
Well, how about I think I can do it from memory and you can correct me if, as
Okay.
you find the stack.
Okay, I found it,
Okay, great.
It was moved that the LUPZ support the request for variances as it is currently configured with the provisos that the configuration of the top floor of the Highland facade be investigated to push it back from the current plane, and that attention be paid to the massing of the top floor of Unit 8 on the Highland side of Unit 8 to provide relief to the houses on West Highland. So that motion was seconded and the vote was 4 in favor and 1 against. And those provisions have been addressed subsequently by the applicant.
Thank you very much, Gene. Celeste, back to you.
Yeah, okay. Has the next question, has the applicant submitted any light studies for the project?
Yeah, I saw that in chat. Actually, we haven't done any computer light study yet, but I noticed there, just to respond to a few things I saw, because I think there was a question about what light would come out from the garages or something onto the sidewalk. So the first garage, actually, where that arch opening is, the only lights in that garage are downlights, recessed downlights that are placed, so they're not going to be shining any light out that window onto the sidewalk. So we actually took care with the location of all those lights. During the Jan's comments, we had talked about that the only lighting would be sort of lighting along the garden path, and probably some enunciation of each of the units so someone could find 1 through 8 once they're walking down there. And so probably be some sort of lantern that would be at the mounted onto the garden wall between each of the units that would light the walkway along the way. And then some way of there would obviously have to be a light at each door. So it's really the whole idea is to keep the keep the lighting down, and because it makes for a safer environment if the only thing that's lit is the periphery of the project, so that the person can see the entirety of the periphery around them. So the lighting will be kept sort of down and low, and in conjunction with that, the plantings at each garden will be kept pretty spare at lower levels, so there won't be any hiding places for lurkers. So I don't know if there were other aspects of the lighting.
Yeah, there is one question about, can you address lighting seeping from the garage windows facing Highland Avenue at the pedestrian level? Fluorescent, warm, cool?
Oh, well, that was what I thought I was doing. So the garages face the public parking lot. So that's where the doors are. So there is there needs to be a light outside every door to the building. There would be again a series of downlights along there, recessed lighting that would light the area along there, just for security. But there's no, in terms of the light fixtures in the garages, the lighting is again kept into the kind of recessed and or over off to the side from where the doors are.
Okay, there are 2 people who would like to speak. I'm going to go with Elizabeth Moxie first, and then Gail Marshall, you can go after that. So Elizabeth, if you're there, if you want to ask your question or say what you wanted to say.
Elizabeth, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. So I am a resident since 1994 of East Highland Avenue. So I live in the row house, in a row house, on the 200 block, and the architecture and ability to upgrade is phenomenal. So my concern about what I'm hearing about the 30 West Highland Avenue is the construction does not seem to be in keeping with Chestnut Hill historical building. When I see the images, the construction does not look substantial. It certainly does not look as if it would be, surviving for 100 years. And we've been seeing too much of that lately. And it's very concerning. I have no objection to upgrades, but I think upgrades need to be in keeping with the historical construction and the quality that it represents. Thank you.
Well, the materials we're using are Wisick and schist for the entire ground floor of the building, which is coming off of the existing building, which is probably the premier building material used in Chestnut Hill and Mount Airy for the ground floor. And then for the next two floors, we're using Roman brick, which is probably the next most, or brick, which is one of the probably the next most sense of permanence in Chestnut Hill and other locations. The four houses adjacent to us between 14 through 20 also use Roman brick for the front facade of their buildings. Our brick wraps around the entirety, the same brick wraps around the entirety of the second and third levels, or the first and second floors as we think of it. And so I think that's a pretty durable material. And then the material on the top actually is a pre-finished material. It has a 45-year warranty, which is, I just challenge you to find another material with 45-year warranty. The windows are fluorostatic, clad aluminum windows that are
so Larry,
25
can you
year.
hear?
So I guess,
Larry.
I'd have to say that these are permanent materials, not insubstantial.
Larry, can you
Larry,
can you hear me? Can you hear me, Larry?
I can.
Okay, thank you. So you just cited 45 years longevity. I think that most of us are looking at hundreds of years of longevity, and that's my concern. And for Carl, I think was his name, I don't remember, but who lives in Drummoor. I mean, he seems in favor of this property, but Drummoor is, again, a historical landmark in Chestnut Hill. And what year was that built? Like, if you, Larry, can say that in 200 years, this property that you're developing is going to still be relevant, I'd be interested to hear about
Well,
that.
let me just say,
Let's,
okay, so let me just, I'd like to answer that because my client, Stephen Riskin, who lives at 2 Drummoor, is actually here on the call. And we reconstructed what had been a kitchen there, conservatory space, renovated that into a kitchen. We had to rebuild the entire structure because it was not, the original structure was really never calculated. It was falling, it was sagging. And in the course of doing that, we replaced that with the same aluminum clad windows, which are wood on the inside, with a steel structure. And we replaced a leaking glass roof with translucent insulated fiberglass panels. And in the course of that, we had numerous people from around the Drummoor development coming to us and saying, please, could we get windows like that because of our rotting windows. And this is not the original Drummoor. This is from the ones that were built in 1981. And so when we did that project in 2011, we had numerous visitors from walking around who would love to have had windows that weren't rotting from the outside and stucco that was beginning to fail. So I've been all around Drew Moore. So the original building at Drew Moore is Wissahick and schist, which is the same building, same material we are reusing for this building. We actually replaced windows at Drew Moore in previous work on the original house, and actually restore them to their arch top opening, which they were supposed to have. So we've worked at Drew Moore. I did the buildings at Wick. Those are the first buildings that were done at Wick since the 1830s. That's the historic house in Germantown. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's a quality and the stature of the building, of the locations we've done work at. And the buildings we've done there are, and all the buildings we've done, we've not gotten reports about failing materials. So another thing, when you get
I think we're going to move on to the next question.
So
We wanna
wait,
make
I'm
sure-
sorry, Larry.
To Gail
I just-
Marshall, Elizabeth.
I would like
think
to
we
ask
need move
Larry.
on. No, we need to move on, Elizabeth.
No, I'm sorry. I just want to ask one more question. So Larry.
Can we come back to you, Elizabeth? Why don't we do that?
No, I'm just going to ask a question.
Gail, are you ready?
I'm ready, but I can wait for Elizabeth to ask her question. If it's okay with everybody else.
Come back to Elizabeth.
Okay, well, I'm going to start off with first going back to what we said about 45 years is what this building is supposed to last. We are not in the age of disposability right now. I thought we were moving in the age of sustainability. So I don't think 45 years is a sustainable amount of time for a building to last.
That's not what I said. I said that particular cladding material has a warranty of 45 years.
I will move on. So according to the information given by John Landis about what the ZBA will consider as adverse impact on surrounding property. First, I want to know, what data do you have that supports the community benefits, considering that the majority of the community is clearly opposed to this development? In particular, the mass transit. How do you know that the people living there are actually going to utilize it? Eyes on the street, what does that mean? I'm also highly concerned about the traffic. Highland Avenue West is the only two-way street between Willow Grove to Evergreen, and that's already created a burden on our street. I avoid driving on my street because of that. And I want to go back also to what Russ Peeling said about the left, the right, going in and out, how confusing it can be because you do have much traffic happening there. Also, the historical aspect of West, the building already existing. You're saying the reason why it's not sustainable is because there's asbestos. Asbestos remediation can happen and buildings can be safe if asbestos remediation is done properly. As we can see, that's happening in many school buildings without the school district of Philadelphia. So if you're really concerned about asbestos in a small building like that and you're tearing it down, then I'm thinking maybe you can really reconsider how you're approaching the school district of Philadelphia and what their asbestos remediation should be, because maybe we should be tearing down Jenks, tearing down many schools across the school district throughout the Philadelphia region. And we are not in Center City, so we really don't need rooftop observatories to look across the city. The reason why there's rooftop observatories is to see what you cannot see. We have that.
I'm gonna just cut you off and ask Larry to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll do my best to remember the list. First of all, well, I guess let me go back and see how many of these I remember. So, I don't know how many of you as kids climbed out of your roof to see what it was like being up high up in the trees, but I think to say that we don't need roof decks in any location, I mean, if roof decks are something that actually would give, and I have one, gives you a completely different sense being in an elevated place. So I think I think that sort of, we don't have these here, or we don't need these. That's your opinion, but it's not our opinion. In terms of traffic, there are 20 some vehicles that go in and out of that parking lot every day, or at least would be if we were all completely back to work. So we have the vehicles of 6 to 8 units going in and out of there. So we have a reduction in the traffic, not an increase. We also have the only two-way in and out drive that is actually properly sized in terms of its width. The bottleneck is at the public parking lot, which is not wide enough for cars to go in and out of simultaneously. That's creating a problem. We're not creating a problem. I think everybody's a good enough driver here to go in and out of our driveway across from that lot. So I'm just going to leave that up to people's driving ability. I'm sorry I've forgotten some of the rest of your questions, but to me, it's a lot of we don't do that here or all that. And I would just say that that's maybe is the way you want to live, but it may not be the way everybody else wants to live.
Celeste?
Yeah, I'll move on to a question. Can the applicant briefly recap the hardship that would result in the denial of the use variance and reiterate whether a variance from height restrictions is requested?
There is no variance for height or any other dimensional standard on this project. The only variance that for which we're requesting relief is a use variance, because on a CA1 property, there is no residential use that is allowed as of right. That is, the hardship is simply that it's not only a reasonable use that happens all around this property, but it's an in-demand use as opposed to a commercial property right now. So it is in demand, it's an appropriate use, it just does not happen to be an allowed use on this particular property given its current zoning. If the property was rezoned CMX2, it would be a completely different story.
All right, thank you. I'm going to read a comment here. I don't intend to speak, but for the record, while the design has improved, the mass is completely inappropriate for this neighborhood. With quote unquote pilot houses to 47 feet, there is no relationship to the unique feel of Chestnut Hill. This is the beginning of a slippery slope. 2 or 3 houses of a lower height should still be plenty profitable.
So when you looked at the image, did you see the pilot house from the street or even from across the street? No. So the pilot houses are only allowed to include a stair and an elevator. They have a very tight 160 square foot limit, and we have organized the units so that the pilot houses sit actually about 20 feet back from the face of the buildings in every direction, really.
So Larry, can I insert another question here? Who will be allowed to use the roof deck? What is proposed up there?
Well, I think last week somebody asked whether there would be any indoor living spaces up there ever, and the answer to that is a definite no. What one does on a roof deck, half of it is a green roof, actually, so there's plant material up there that's actually absorbing water. Hopefully there's people can gather up there, have conversations, admire the view. You can see Center City is a mere 11 miles away, so you can see that from up there.
I also think, Celeste, that if I read the question correctly, who's going to be able to use those roof decks? It's just the owners of the individual townhomes. There's no connection between any of the roof decks on the roof.
Oh, right. Yeah, they're each one's separate. only accessed from the interior of each unit. Sorry.
Okay.
Great.
Here's another comment. The existing property created an open space. This proposal takes that away and blocks the sunlight from adjacent properties. The architectural design does not fit into the historical picture of Chestnut Hill, traffic-wise. Highland Avenue is the only two-way street north of Willow Grove. This many townhouses being built will create, and then it ends. I think we can get the point.
Celeste, let me just add something to what Larry said before about the traffic. We indicated that there's 8 townhomes with two car garages, so that's 16 vehicles. My current property has 29 parking spaces on it. And when we're pre-COVID, that's how many people our lot was filled. In addition to that, we have probably approximately 20 trucks or vehicle delivery trucks that come in. And I also have 25 trucks on the street that come in periodically. So in our opinion, the actual traffic will be decreased immensely by this development. Thank you.
So I see further down that this person did go on to say that this many townhouses being built will create a nightmare in congestion during construction and after. So Henry, you just addressed some of that, not the construction period. Moving on, I agree with the Conservancy statement, general feelings of the whole community. And another question about whether a light study has been done. Mary Ellen, it looks like you would like to speak about the disturbance to the neighbors by light and noise coming from use on the top of the floor deck.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm an immediate neighbor. I live in the Twin at 38 West Highland, which is the building immediately across the driveway from the new building. My concern is not the appearance of the building, except if I think the height is too much. Most of our homes are 3 stories. This is 4, and then the deck. And I'm sure the ceilings are higher than ours. So it's towering over them. But my concern is the use. My concern is our quiet, dark street with a couple of street lights and some 1 bulb porch lights. And now coming from the roof of this building will be light, a glow, which I think will be harsh and unappealing and unattractive in the neighborhood. More than that, I'm concerned about noise. You talked about gathering, you talked about conversation. I'm concerned about music. I'm concerned that I will not have the peaceful use of my own yard and front porch, and I will have to listen to parties. This to me has a feel of a party deck, like a restaurant and bar deck. And I see nothing but potential for conflict and disturbance. And I don't understand the need for that potential problem so that somebody can observe the community around them. Let them look out their window. It seems unfair to me. And I think it's interesting that the street committee was concerned about the glow of light coming from windows onto the sidewalk. What about the glow into the sky? There's even movements in cities, I think Philadelphia included, about toning down the lights because of bird migration and confusion to the birds. It just seems to me an unnecessary and potentially disturbing feature to this building with very little merit. To eliminate it would also save the builder money. You don't need an elevator. You have a totally different structure on the roof when you have people going to walk on it and furniture on it. It doesn't have to be made of the same material. I also didn't understand that each of these roof decks were separate for each unit. I thought it was a single deck. So the people in the 2 separate units, they don't have a rooftop deck. Only the people in the larger section of units. And I don't
Oh,
understand if
excuse
they
me.
are separate units, how a single elevator will get people up to the deck. What is the purpose of a single elevator if there are all separate yards essentially?
There
So,
are,
Okay,
from a
Mariana, I
selfish
think Larry
standpoint-
and Henry can respond to your question.
Yeah, I'm
so-
just concerned selfishly about the disturbance to me and my neighbors from the noise and light on this building.
I understand that. And Larry, let me ask a question. Do we don't have any lights designed for that roof deck, correct? Other than safety blow down? Okay, so I don't think there are any
the
lights.
only lights that we probably have there would be, almost like deck
60.
level lights, like,
I don't
18
think-
inches above the floor.
Right, so I don't think there's going to be any lights up there. In terms of a party deck, the market, I think that these we are hoping to do, and I plan on living on one. And I will tell you right now, my party days are over. I'm 60 some plus years old, so 60 years old. So I'm not going to be out there partying and doing stuff like that. They're individual units that have a deck up on the roof. They have individual elevators for each of the units, only for them. And quite frankly, I would think that it's going to be for people that want to retire and move out of their larger houses, but still want to stay in Chestnut Hill. At least that's my impression of this. And that's why I'm wanting to have one of these units also, so that I can be able to stay in Chestnut Hill. So I don't think the roof deck is an issue.
I have no doubt that if people are going to use this space at night, if for eating, for barbecuing, there will be lights up there. I'm concerned that people might even put strings of lights on the railings, which are things people do. And I would like to eliminate the possibility of this kind of light and noise pollution by simply eliminating it. I don't think that that is a mandatory or even desirable feature on this building. There is not, as far as I can think of, a single other new construction building like this in Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy, that has this feature. There are some downtown, and I know that they are not well received, and I would like to see it eliminated. I think it is you asked the question about will this building enhance the value of the neighborhood?
Yes.
And I think it could. I think this feature will decrease the value. And I think
Okay,
it will,
thank you, Mary Ellen.
I'm going to move on. There's a question, has the applicant made traffic studies?
No. But just to reiterate what Henry has said, there's a firm belief that this will be a reduction in traffic.
Yeah, I think it's just, and I know we did not do a traffic study, but I think common sense tells you with a 29 spot parking lot with 25 service trucks and deliveries all day long, to change that to 8 townhomes would be a substantial difference. I mean, that's just my common sense. But no, we did not do a traffic study.
Just one more point to answer Ms. Caffrey. That your house is 60 feet away from the western edge of the townhouses. So, and the decks are set back probably 6 to 8 feet from the west edge of the roof. So the angle, and they're 38 feet. So the angle is probably unlikely that you're going to see anyone up on the deck unless they're right up on the western railing, perhaps. So, I think just in terms of feeling like, and you're not going to see a lot of light. Light needs a surface to bounce off, and all we have up there is the sky. So there's really not going to be any kind of light pollution that you're afraid of. But I do think,
agree
as you
with that.
pointed
You
out,
certainly do see beams of light in the sky. People used to
Yeah, we're
use
not-
it to advertise movies.
Listen,
And I certainly
but
am
Mary
concerned
Ellen,
about music being played and loud music that will disturb me. And
Well,
I
you
don't
know-
want to have that.
Okay, so the other thing I want to mention, so there's a Philadelphia ordinance about noise. There's a noise ordinance. That's a Philadelphia thing. But the lights on the railing, that could very easily be an HOA thing. That's just a thing. No strong lights on the roof. Period. Done. Next. So.
So, all right, I'm going to move
Okay.
on. There's
I
a
think it's
person-
unreasonable and it's naive to expect that.
Okay, Celeste, keep
There's
going.
a person that would like to make a comment, Jennifer Roselli. If you'd like to unmute yourself and
Sure. I mean, just for fun, actually, sorry, my husband has it on his laptop and it's giving me terrible echo. So let me turn that off. Hang on.
We're hearing you okay.
Sure, that's
Okay, I'll muddle through. Just for fun, I'm going to give a minority opinion that I am generally supportive of this project. I do live in Chestnut Hill, downslope. I've lived here about 20 years. I'm an urban planner, so I am in the business. And if you came to me with the proposed E.B. O'Reilly building and that giant parking lot, I would not be impressed. I would not say, this is a great building, this is a great project. So for me, this is a much higher and better use for that parcel than what is there now. Just because something is old does not make it special. I do recognize that renderings can look very flat and lifeless, and that's, you know, you're early in a project, these are not fully detailed, and you're not getting the richness of the materiality, but knowing that this is Wissahick and schist, that this is Roman brick, that these are aluminum clad windows, those are high quality materials. Knowing that this is owner occupied is huge, because when push comes to shove and developments happen, scrimping happens down the road because for all the reasons we know about. And with it being owner occupied, I think it's really incumbent on the owner for this to be a quality project. So I think that's a big asset. I'm generally pro-density for sustainability reasons. This is a walkable neighborhood. These are more modestly sized than some of the new units that are going up. I did not get a square footage, actually. I'm just extrapolating that. So I would be interested to hear the square footage on these units, but they look more modest in size, more compact. I think they do allow aging in place. I like the courtyard design. I think the circulation makes sense. So on any project, are there things I would personally do differently? Of course, but this is not my project. It's not my personal project. It's for somebody else to design. So I'm speaking in a generality. I think it's a nice project. I think Larry's a great architect. I think he has done beautiful work around Chestnut Hill that people should take a look at. And that gives me some faith that when the details come out, this is going to be actually really well detailed. So I just wanted to give a minority viewpoint there.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, lighting studies daytime to assess impacts to adjacent property.
Well, the way the project sits, we've done studies to see, and essentially what we did is we actually made the massing the way we did to respond to the greatest extent possible to preserving light and air for all the adjacent buildings. For instance, the ground floor of 1 through 6 has to be where it has to be because of the driveway, the two-lane driveway that we have. But the upper floors of the building actually cantilever out over the driveway, which actually provides more space between the upper floors of our buildings and 20 West Highland. And then, so those are all work in that kind of way. And that gives, so that leaves our building about 25 feet away from, 30 feet away from the wall of 20 West. And then we're still 55 to 60 feet away from the wall of, I'm sorry, Mary Ellen, 38 West. So now on unit 7 and 8, we have some buildings back there and some apartments. So what we did with those is actually, again, as I was saying, on those, the ground floor, those are actually not as wide, but they're longer. So in that one, the garage, basically, there's no building above most of that garage. That whole building is shifted quite a ways west so that it, and then at the top of that building, it's set back away from the rear of 14 through 20. So it's better during the morning hours, but it's also set back the same 3.5 feet from that apartment, and there's several structures that are sort of northeast of or east of the project. So the shadows cast on that building would actually, I mean, nobody's getting full sun during the winter solstice, but there's actually, we found that the light was being preserved quite well to the adjacent neighbors and that our massing is, and some of the things we've done since we started was all in service of doing that, is making that work.
Okay, there are several people that wish to speak, so I'm going to name you in order of when we'd like you to speak. So we'll start with Christian Pilling, and then Hillary O'Carroll, and then Shane Kramer, and then Patricia Estat, and then Elizabeth Moxie, and then Robert Payne. So Christian Pilling, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think it's ironic that the architect cited Jane Jacobs' concept of eyes on the street, and ironic because the development still includes an entire wall of garages, which is sort of the polar opposite of what she meant by that statement. Eyes on the street is supposed to have activity, supposed to have windows, front stoops, front porches that face the street, and the approach coming east on Highland Avenue towards this building, you'll be presented with a wall of garages. And I think that sets a really unfortunate precedent in Chestnut Hill, which is famous for being a walkable neighborhood with 2 heavy rail lines, a deactivated streetcar line, as well as actually Highland Avenue is a bike route. And I just don't see, especially, in the light of some of the previous comments about like, is this good urbanism? Is this good urban planning? I don't understand how you can say that when the entire first floor of this development is devoted to cars and not people. And I feel that this precedent, as these new developments come online, whether it's because the community is pressing for more parking when you build more density, or whether the developers feel that they'll get a greater return on their investment by creating all these garages. I think it's just this slip towards suburbanization and making Chestnut Hill look more like King of Prussia or Levittown. And I think that's the most sort of obscene and inappropriate thing about this development. And, as for everybody else's concerns about heights and scale and stuff like that, if you get rid of the garages, those concerns go away, and this turns into a much more approachable, appropriate scale development for the neighborhood. I see this type of development happening all over the city, entire blocks in Center City, where the fronts of what used to be beautiful row houses are driveways and garages. And it's just not.
Christian, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm going to cut you off. Let other people speak. Larry, let's hear from some other folks about their opinions.
We'll move on to Hillary O'Carroll.
Hi, guys. Hi, Larry. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I know this is probably really, cumbersome and tedious. We have so many people and so many thoughts about it. And I honor everything that everybody else about all of their, particular concerns about rooftops or variances or off the street. But I'm just wondering, I know you're an extraordinary architect. I've seen your work. It's beautiful, but it feels like it belongs somewhere else. And when I look at it, it feels like I'm in Orlando, or I'm, somewhere that Chestnut Hill didn't steal my heart over. And so I'm wondering if there was any attempt, at least, to blend, to look like it belongs here. And I know that you're going to come back and say, well, that's my opinion. Does it belong here? But there's a historical feeling and a charm that Chestnut Hill has that we are all so enchanted with. And when I pass a building, there are a few already, when I pass a building that looks like that, it just stands out in a way that feels incongruous. So if you use Wissahick and schist and you use the right brick, but you don't use the right angles and lines and arches and height, I think that is what's really ultimately causing everyone's disgruntled feeling about it, is it just sticks out and it doesn't feel like home. I'll take your response.
Are we going to let more people?
Yeah, Shane Kramer, if you would like to speak.
Yes, thank you. Along the same lines, I've heard different, I think, conflicting information about the standards for getting a variance. John laid out 4 standards for getting a variance. The first one being a reasonable request, and I think he said that it had to be a reasonable request in terms of the mass and height. But then later, I think Larry just said it had to be a reasonable request in terms of the use. And it seemed like that was a conflicting explanation. And maybe I just misunderstood what Larry was saying. But it seems to me if the reasonable request is tied to the scale of the project, not just the use. Again, what people are saying about the mass and height, it just seems to me that, again, the scale of this project just does not belong where it is. And it's just, with all due respect, the original design was like plopping down the Titanic, and the adjustments are like replacing it with the RMS Olympic, a slightly smaller scale, but we're still talking about the wrong scale, the wrong size. It's just too big. And using phrases like it relates to something nearby sounds good, but it just is the wrong size. It's going to overwhelm the block. And with the traffic, I'm kind of alarmed that you haven't done a traffic study, and to say that just because you think, because the trucks haven't been a problem, and that it's probably going to be okay with the residential use. I mean, I've lived here for 18 years across the street, and with school in session, and again, this is a two-way street, one of the only ones up at the top of the hill. The traffic backs up at rush hour. It backs up all the way to the firehouse sometimes. And if you haven't done a traffic study, you can't just say, I think it's going to be okay. And sometimes, I use gravers sometimes because the traffic's so bad. So it's already a problem. So it's already a problem. And to say you think it's going to be okay, and it's probably going to be okay, or probably better, just because you think it's going to be okay, that's just not good enough. And so I'm alarmed that you haven't done a traffic study already. And that seems to be one of the steps, according to John, that you should have already done. And that we've come this far already, and to hear that you haven't even done the study, according to John, that's the third step that you should have done. I'm concerned. So,
Larry, do you want to respond to that?
Larry, did you want to respond to the issue of traffic?
Well, I don't feel shame that we haven't done a traffic study. I feel like we have made an assessment of things based upon going from 29 cars and trucks in traffic in and out all day to the comings and goings of 8 homeowners. I've lived here 30 years on West Evergreen Avenue. So I often come up Highland, and yes, there is some traffic on Highland, but the traffic we're talking about on Highland is not the level of traffic that 8 townhomes as opposed to almost 30 trucks and vehicles coming in and out of O'Reilly's lot is going to it's a reduction.
And quite frankly, the traffic flow in my office is at rush hour. So the 29 vehicles that are coming into work every day are coming in at rush hour, and they're leaving at rush hour. This new development, and I think there's just got to be some common sense applied to this. traffic study or no traffic study, taking, 30 people working in an office building with 29 cars and multiple vehicles coming in and out all day versus 8 townhomes with 2 cars max on the property, has to be understood that there's going to be less. That's just my opinion. I know it's just my opinion. Maybe that doesn't mean anything, but I think that's just common sense.
I'm going to move on to Patricia Estott. Patricia, if you would like to speak.
Sorry, who is this?
You can unmute yourself.
Patricia.
I live at 36 West Highland, the last house next to the parking lot. And there's no way that you can tell me that having that big, tall building on the other side of the parking lot is not going to interfere with my privacy in my backyard. People can look down from the heights that you're going to put them. And as far as the traffic, that traffic is only during the week. Those townhouses are there on the weekends when it's very busy on the avenue. And so you'll have traffic coming in and out all the time, not just during the working week. So I'm very concerned about my own privacy. I have a nice yard, but people will be able to look into it very easily from the height that you're putting them.
So I thought somebody else I just talked to was the person.
No, she's my neighbor. I'm on the other side of her. I'm right next to the fence.
Yeah. So you're actually even probably, it's going to be just the angle of trying to see down over the, I guess we could show you a section or something, figure that out. But yeah, I think again, the railing, the deck is set back from the edge of the roof. The roof is at 38 feet. You're 60 feet away. You'd have to have it'd have to be very close to see down anything onto there. So
but Mary Ellen she was right about the lights coming, but I'm more concerned about me being back there in my yard and having people looking right down. It's like living in the city right next to a high rise.
Well, yeah, I guess Mary Ellen could look down from her 3rd floor bedroom window into your backyard too. So
yes, but she's one person and I know her. It's not like a whole big building.
Yeah.
It's not the same at all. Yeah. But that's my feeling.
Again, I think
you're making it
I do think that we're on the lower floors. Actually, there's planting that's going to come up a certain height. So, and on the upper floor, again, we're just, pretty far back from that roof deck.
So what about the trucks coming only in 5 days a week and the other people being there on the weekends when it's so crowded on the avenue?
Well, let's just remember that a lot of reason people, all of us here, live here is because we don't have to drive everywhere. And on the weekend, we may just walk up and down the avenue, do nice things, shop, doing all the kind of things we all do. I drove my car 1,100 miles last year, and 300 of those were going to Storm King and back up in upstate New York. So, that's just the way people live here, and because you lived here a long time. You don't.
Yes,
you don't
not these people.
Yeah,
but not these people moving in.
You can't say.
Patricia,
there's no way to know who's moving in
Patricia,
here.
Patricia, I think you expressed your concerns very well. Let's move on and hear some more.
So Elizabeth Moxie, I'm going to go back to you.
I think she's the last one.
Well, there's one more, at least, after Elizabeth. If Elizabeth is there.
So he said Mary Ellen could very well look into my yard from her 3rd floor.
So, I'm going to move on to Robert Payne.
Tell him that that's an apartment. She lives on the 1st floor.
I'm gonna move on to Robert Payne. If you want to unmute yourself, Robert.
Hi, this is Robert Kane. It's
Kane.
So I really appreciate and want to concur with what the first 4 people had to say here, especially with the historical nature of our community. And I'm disappointed that the architectural design does not fit in more to the historical history of even the city of Philadelphia. Not the fact that new materials can't be used and so on and so forth. But I'm not going to reiterate what everybody else has said. But what I do encourage everybody that's listening to this broadcast, that you send letters to the Zoning Board of Adjustments and you get them to the zoning board by next week with all your concerns, because they will listen to them. And the more we get those letters to the zoning board, the more we're going to be listened to. But I am disappointed that there wasn't more thought put into the design to fit in, especially to the design of the homes and residences on West Highland Avenue. So thank you very much.
So, all right, two more comments here. One, a suggestion that I inform the group that there was a 100-person limit on today's Zoom meetings. So many people have contacted this person saying that they could not get access to the Zoom. The account had a 300-person limit, so we're not sure what went awry, but unfortunately, we cannot change what's going on in the middle of this meeting. Moving on to another question. Are we considering a hardship to be when an applicant is not allowed to switch to an in-demand use?
I guess we'll have to let the Zoning Board of Adjustment determine that. That's,
okay.
Can we go back to I don't want to forget the people that spoke before.
Sure, sure.
So Christian Pilling. So Eyes on the Street has to do with that on both the first and third floors, we have balconies that wrap around onto the street. We have an entry from the street for Unit 1. The garages that you're talking about are specifically located on adjacent to a public parking lot so we're putting the cars next to cars, and then on the for Units 7 and 8, those garages are on an alley, which shares parking with other parked cars. So in the case of all these, and those garages are pretty quietly tucked back behind there, and there's a screen of planting that runs the entirety of the west edge of the project. So those garages are not going to be much seen at all from there. So yes, I'll contend that this has eyes on the street. We also have a bay window in Unit 1 that projects out, is quite open. There's a lot of glazing on Unit 1, particularly on the first floor above the ground. The other thing, and somebody else asked about this in the last meeting last month, well, just what's going on, and this is all just garages on the ground floor. No, the average of all the 8 units, the average use of split between garage and living space on the first floor is 50%. So half of the ground floor is actually living space, and half is cars. We have 2 parking spaces per unit, not because the code requires that, but because if it allows for, if somebody does have 2 cars, nobody's trying to find a space on the street and take it away from one of you. And number 2, if there was also someone who was disbelieving that if you only had 1 car and somebody was coming over for dinner, that person would actually park in your garage. And Henry and I talked about it afterwards, and we said, if they came to either of our houses, we would be pushing the button or whatever we had to do, opening the garage door, and people would just come right on in and use that. The other thing is that people may have other objects that they want to have here. So the 2-car garage is a good thing for the neighborhood, because it provides a huge amount of parking. The apartment building that everybody's discussing on 10 Bethlehem Pike has almost no parking for 35 apartment units. So that's a case where people are going to be searching the neighborhood. But I think we're in pretty good shape here, and I'll just say that yes, we believe this is good urban planning. It actually is diminutive on the street. I was going to go to in terms of scale and whether this is Chestnut Hill. I think again, computer renderings are, on the one hand, they show you pretty much how things are going to be, but they're not reality in terms of looking at materials. So the same stone that you're going to walk by and see on the ground floor of this building, it's the same stone that you walk by right now and see on the building that's there. It's not different than that. It is that stone, literally. The brick is the same brick that's on the houses 14 through 20, and actually about 6 more twins further west on Highland Avenue on the same side of the street also use Roman brick. So it's pretty much, it's almost like it's a material of West Highland Avenue. And you know, the material on the top, if that wears out after 50 years, well, it'll just like everybody's slate roof after 75 years, it'll be replaced with other materials. But the basic materials of the building are materials that you find throughout Chestnut Hill. They are colors that you find in the natural environment here as well as in buildings. So I think it does speak to permanence, and permanence, you know, all these houses, they're permanent, but they all have O'Neill painting. Everybody's painting companies is out and about every year in the warm months. So we'll have a little less of that than most developments have.
So Larry, if I may, I want to continue with reading comments here. One is, I don't want to speak, but I do have a comment. Honestly, I'm very frustrated by this process. It's proof that the community's wishes are not as important as the pursuit of the almighty dollar. Henry has the opportunity to do something with this space that truly benefits Chestnut Hill and preserves its history, but instead he seeks to maximize profit at the expense of the neighbors. Another comment, Mr. O'Reilly has indicated that he is moving his business outside of Philadelphia for financial reasons. I'd like to understand if those reasons include taxes, because that would be ironic, moving his business because it's cheaper to run it outside the city than taking advantage of the 10-year tax abatement.
Can I respond to that, Celeste?
Uh-huh.
So I don't know where that comment came from, because at previous discussions, I was asked what I was doing with my business, and the game plan is to find another property in Chestnut Hill where we could move, quite frankly, and that's the game plan all along, and that is continuing to be my game plan. So I don't have any desire to move outside of Chestnut Hill. My employees like Chestnut Hill. They like walking on the street. I need to just find the spot, and with the way things are changing, we're downsizing just because of the way nature of COVID did. And even before COVID, we were talking about downsizing because we don't need the size of the house, of the building anymore. So that comment is inaccurate.
Okay, thank you. Will the HOA mandate that owners can own no more than 2 cars? Is that a Carl question? Will the HOA mandate that owners can own no more than 2 cars?
No, because how do you police it? I mean, basically the form of the development has X amount of garage spaces, and it's almost like saying that the people who live in the twins on a block. I mean, your house is built either with parking or without parking, but you can't mandate people. The same way you can't have an HOA saying you can't have guests. There was a meeting years ago at Hilltop Avenue, and somebody said, well, what about the parking? You know, we get a lot of people New Year's Eve. Well, there's a lot of people that get visitors New Year's Eve that don't have any parking. You know, we live in an urban area, so you can't control everything. What you can control is what you build and how you manage it.
Okay, thank you. I see one more hand raised that we haven't heard from Marion Frank. Marion, if you want to speak, you need to unmute yourself. I think you need to unmute yourself still, Marion. Marion, we can't hear you.
Okay, I think I got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm your target audience because we've been living in a big house in Chestnut Hill for 30 years, and we are thinking about downsizing. I love the location of your property. It would make it easy for us to go to Center City. We still work part-time. I just don't love the aesthetics of it. And because I've always loved my Chestnut Hill house, I wouldn't be able to move to a place that I didn't feel was beautiful. So I just wish that it was a redesign. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And I hope if you move, you do decide to stay in Chestnut Hill, whether this is built or not.
I think if you,
Oh, I'm staying, yeah.
I think if you could see inside and outside one of these units, you would change your mind. It's a beautiful open, it's a beautiful, the planning, the interior environment, it's a beautifully open, light-filled environment, each unit.
So I think this is the last thing,
Okay,
a
this is the
comment
last
and a
thing.
question from one person. So the comment is the pilot house will be visible from down the street as one walks toward the avenue. And the question is, how can the subcommittee process have been a negotiation when the owner and architect refused to consider fewer and shorter buildings?
First of all, from down the street, Henry's done some photography, but from down the street, the street trees in each direction prevent you from seeing much of this building before you get to it. So I just think of the many things you're going to be seeing, those pilot houses not going to be a feature of your of what you see. I think there's so much ado is being made out of these pilot houses. It's just a minor thing.
And with regard to the, I think one of the comments earlier or at some point was our refusal to listen to the number of units or downsizing units. Larry and I have been talking about this for a long time, and we have explored a number of things. And when the subcommittee proposed the different ones, we did take a serious look at that and see how we could do this, or is this a viable option? And for all the reasons Larry enumerated previously, it just didn't work. And I think we explained that well to the subcommittee, and I think they accepted that, as Bill said.
Okay, thank you, Henry. Thank you, Larry. Thank you to everyone here. I'm looking at how many people are participating. We've been going for almost 3 hours and we still have 75 people going on. So that's a wonderful testament to how interested people are in the community. And whether you like the project or you don't, we really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the comments and the time people have put into thinking about what they want to say. And we've heard some good suggestions tonight. So I just want to say thank you to all who are participating. So this is the point at which I ask if any members of the Development Review Committee, would like to make a motion regarding a recommendation one way or another for this project. So Celeste, can you recognize anyone who pops up and would like to make a motion? Members of the DRC.
Looking for a hand. Steve, please go ahead.
Yes. I apologize for not being visible earlier in the evening. I have been listening. I am a member of the LUPZ. I am an architect and developer. I'm an urbanist, a preservationist, and frankly, I'm a realist. And this is a very particular property. I speak for myself, but also it was discussed roundly in the subcommittee. This is a very unique property where you have incredibly low footprint ratio to the size of the property. And the particular buildings that are there are not in the right place for redevelopment, as was a case was made to the subcommittee, and a majority of us understood that was the case. So we started to work on improving this project. It reduced by essentially 1/2 a unit in terms of mass. Many of the aesthetic aspects got much better in terms of the impact on the street, the landscaping, and the operational issues. So I would like to make a motion based on the subcommittee's very diligent work that the DRC approve this zoning variance with the proviso that the agreements, the design, so thus the work of the committee, be memorialized in the package of documents that the ZBA approves and that runs with the land in perpetuity. That's the essential motion.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. I know you had a lot of other things going on tonight, so we appreciate your hanging in there.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
May I ask a question before seconding?
Sure.
Can the proviso also include the items from the Streetscape Committee?
Could you review though what those were, Jan?
No external signage, external lighting for safety, internal lighting blocked from spilling onto the sidewalk or other residential buildings, minimum of 12 mature trees. I believe that's already taken care of. Verify that the existing large tree slated for removal is not a heritage tree, and confirmation that the color of the brick is similar to that used nearby.
Yes, we'll agree to all that. Yeah. And I
Steve,
think
will you accept that as an amendment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Then I second it.
Thank you, Jan.
Jan, thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. We can now move to discussion of the motion. And this is, discussion of the motion is limited to members of the Development Review Committee. Gina, I think I saw you wanted to raise your hand.
I mean, I would like to make the three conditions that were in the conclusions of in the memorandum from the subcommittee, to make those three conditions part of the motion. I can read them again. The appearance of the development will be as shown on the drawings, including all changes, modifications agreed to through April 11th, 2021. These changes, modifications are further described in text format as of April 12th. Number two, the operational issues discussed and agreed to are described in text format as of April 12th. These items will be incorporated into such documents required for the operation of the completed development. And number three, an enforceable agreement will be executed between the development's owner and the Chestnut Hill Community Association, stating these conditions to be recorded with and run with the deed. And I would like to add also that a condition that the community be kept apprised of the construction schedule and the impact of the construction on things, including utility impacts, street closures, et cetera. So,
Steve, will you accept those as additional provisions?
Yes.
Jan, will you accept that as the seconder?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other members of the Development Review Committee who would like to speak or ask a question or offer a comment or an amendment? Richard?
I would, John. Yeah. Just a few things listening here. First of all, I don't think we have to worry about roof decks. I don't believe there are going to be any issues from that. If you want to see two roof decks with pilot houses, they were built on Gravers Lane about 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't think they've amounted to much of a problem in the community. I don't think the unit count is too much by any manner of means. And as far as a traffic study is concerned, I think that would probably be unnecessary. When we did the traffic studies for One West, we were very surprised at how we barely made enough traffic with the new development in order to warrant having a new traffic light at the corner of Hartwell Lane. The traffic is not as bad as it appears anecdotally. That being said, the problem with this development, in my view, is we're being asked to give up a contributing building to the historic district. And the one thing that I think would have made a lot of these protestations go away would have been to further reduce the height on Highland Avenue. It's not even what's going on in the middle of the lot, it's how it appears at the street. And I think it's much better than it was, but if it had come down another story. And that would have been a sacrifice on one of the units, much as we went from 6 stories to 5 stories at 1 West because the community was possessed with that building not being any higher than the top knot of the Chestnut Hill Hotel. I think that would have been what would have made a lot of this go away. So where are we? I have a feeling the DRC is going to probably approve this. And we have a situation where the Chestnut Hill Conservancy is opposed. We have more than 200 neighbors who are near neighbors to this project who are going to be opposed to it. And we have split committees. So we have a completely divided neighborhood because we could not get the scale on Highland Avenue on this project down. And I think that is a great problem in this process. And I think we have risked not just the fact that the Community Association Board may vote against it, but that we may alienate many of the neighbors on Highland Avenue from the Community Association. And I think that's a great shame. And what I plan to do is vote against this reluctantly because I like the idea of that kind of a project there, in the hopes that it gets sent back to hopefully reduce it on Highland Avenue a little bit more. That's the problem with this project. And that's why the neighbors are really exercised. A lot of this other stuff, in my view, is just protestation, but it is what's going on Highland Avenue.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Any other comments or friendly amendments or discussion? Would somebody like to call the question?
John, I would like to acknowledge the changes that have been made over the last several months. And while a story maybe wasn't eliminated, I think a lot was done to reduce the impact of the mass on Highland Avenue, and moving the building line to be in line with the other homes, I think made a significant difference, as did the trees. And so I just want to acknowledge both the work that Larry and Henry did and the subcommittee. I think it really did improve the project.
Yeah, I think that's a great statement. Whether you like the project or not, I mean, the process has led to some positive developments. So thank you, Jen. Would somebody like to call the question? A member of the Development Review Committee.
Joyce has her hand up.
I'm not a member of the committee, but I was a member of the subcommittee, and I just would like to say that I understand that people feel are uncomfortable with the design of the building, but I believe that the material selection is sensitive to the surrounding community. It's very high quality material and design. And I believe that buildings should be of their time. That I'm actually personally more offended by the buildings that are imitative of older styles and aren't reflective of current design. And as a member of the subcommittee, I feel like this building has improved immensely. And I really appreciate the way the upper floor now kind of has a little bit of a feel of some of the, without being a mansard, it has some of the feel of the mansards that we find so throughout the community. I also think that the design with the courtyard is something we see all over the community. With Roanoke Court, Winston Court, you name it, this is not, is very of the community. And I appreciate the way the design has evolved. And I think that there's a lot of fear here. And it's that it is really, I think people are going to feel very comfortable with this building when it's done. It's set back from the street. It has landscape. It has a public amenity. I think that the subcommittee and the applicant have really made big changes. Maybe people don't appreciate it, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Joyce, for those thoughtful comments, and thank you, Richard, for your thoughtful comments too. Patricia,
John?
yes.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting evening, and it's been interesting hearing all of the comments from our neighbors. And I would just like to say a couple things that I said at the end of our meeting last night, especially from a couple of the people that spoke earlier. The woman that's lived here for 40 years and is looking to downsize. Hillary O'Carroll's comments about the charm and the character and the sense of place of Chestnut Hill. And although this particular building is going to be made of quality materials, it does not contain the sense of place, the character, and the charm that most of us moved here to actually be surrounded with. So along with the loss of the historic building, I just have to reiterate that I am concerned that with all of the development pressures that we're now going to be faced with, that we might be able to, we are going to start to probably lose a lot of the character, the charm, and the historic feel that our community is known for. And so that would conclude my statement.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Again, very well said. Any other comments by members of the Development Review Committee? Joyce, yeah.
I'm sorry, there was a point that I wanted to make because I attended the HDAC meeting last night where the members of that committee voted against the project. And I believe that the committee would not change their minds if the building was set back, was changed, as Richard suggested. I believe that this was a philosophical decision. That committee felt that they could not support any building that involved tearing down the existing building. I don't think that any design would have changed their minds. And I heard the entire meeting and all of the discussion.
I don't think that's necessarily true, Joyce.
I agree with
Okay,
that.
we're not going to relitigate a meeting of a different committee. I think everybody has made their points quite well and quite articulately. Is there anybody else on the Development Review Committee who would like to speak? If not, I'm going to call the question. And because we have so many people on board, I can't see all the members of the Development Review Committee. So I'm going to call on people individually to indicate their vote. You can vote in support of the motion, you can vote in opposition of the motion, or you can abstain. Jean and Steve, I believe you are the representatives of the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee tonight.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
So Jean, if you don't mind, I'm going to call on you first.
Okay. I say yes.
Okay. Steve, I'm going to call on you next.
I support my motion, yes.
Richard, you're sitting next to Steve on my screen.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Patricia, you're right above on my screen.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Dan, you are next to Patricia.
Support.
Okay. And I believe Sam Filippi, who has just joined the committee, is also present. And Sam, you again, you may feel the need to vote or having just joined the committee. You don't have to.
At this time, I have not met with the Chestnut Hill Business District either. So at this time, I think it would be responsible to abstain from voting.
Okay. I think that's it of the members present. So the motion carries by a vote of 3-2. Melissa, I believe you have been taking down all the recommendations and provisos, and we will forward them to the Chestnut Hill Community Association for their consideration in 2 weeks. I really appreciate, as I've said before, the thoughtfulness of everyone who's spoken tonight and how heartfelt and well-reasoned their comments have been. As I outlined at the beginning, this is not the end of the process, it's sort of the middle of the process. So if you oppose the project as recommended tonight and want to make your thoughts known, please feel free to go to the Chestnut Hill Community Association website and find out who's on the community association and communicate with them. That's why they're there. And also please feel free to come to the meeting in 2 weeks. Celeste, again, remind me the exact time and date of that.
The CHCA board is on April 22nd at 5 p.m.
And that will be a Zoom meeting, and you'll have to request to participate. Is that how it works?
Actually, no, I mean, yes, you can request a Zoom, but also, starting tomorrow, I will put the registration link right on the website so that it saves everybody a step.
Okay.
Can we make sure, John, that we have full capacity for everybody on the call?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Richard. I don't know what went wrong tonight, but we absolutely need everybody who wants to participate to be able to do so. Okay, and however the Chestnut Hill Community Association votes, the ultimate folks who are going to have their say, I think, you never know, but is the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and that is an open meeting too. I don't know how they're handling it on Zoom, but I believe you have to sign up. And Celeste, not so good with dates, for reminding me again when that is.
It's April 28th at 2 p.m. and you just go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment website, and right there on their homepage is the Zoom link that will let you then sign up to attend the meeting and attend the hearing. They typically can go for many hours. They include a lot of projects.
Okay.
So reserve your afternoon.
Thank you. I know not everybody will be pleased with the outcome tonight. As I said, you'll still have time to express your opinions and your convictions. I hope you do. But in the meantime, I want to thank everybody who participated tonight. I specifically want to thank the applicants who've been at this a long time. I want to thank the members of the Development Review Committee, the Streetscapes Committee. I want to thank HDAC members. Streetscape members, LUPZ, I don't know if I've missed anyone, but I particularly want to thank the members of the subcommittee who were more or less drafted to do a thankless task. And they did it with great grace and ability, and I really appreciate their efforts. And thank you all. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Jan. Seeing no opposition, thank you all. Have a great week, a great weekend, and we'll see you at the CHCA meeting.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Good meeting.